Deputy Kenny, 30 seconds to introduce.
Thank you, Leska Hirlock. Minister, the issue around the Community Enhancement Programme, which, as we know, last year has been stated earlier on, was an amalgamation of RAPID and the previous scheme. And you know, there was a substantial amount of funding last year, and it was very welcome and made a big difference in many areas around the country. And this year, it's a much smaller pot, if you like, and I would be welcoming you to come out and tell us here today that you're going to be making a further investment in these communities in the coming months to ensure that they get at least the level of funding that was available last year. Because, you know, and I know that when I'm staying in Dublin here, I stay in the North Inner City, and I see you know, in many cases, these funds. Well, okay, I'll leave it afterwards.
Minister, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Hello. In 2018, I launched the Community Enhancement Programme, which helps community groups to improve facilities in their area. £4 million was originally available for the programme within my department's budget for 2018. The Community Enhancement Programme supports a range of investment in all areas of communities, such as childcare facilities, playgrounds, recreation facilities, sports ground, landscaping projects and supports for the elderly. There was a huge level of interest in the programme right across the country following its launch. So I was delighted to be in a position to allocate an additional one-off funding to the programme later in the year, and the final amount allocated was £13 million. This includes £500,000 that was ring-fenced for the men's shed. Over 3,000 projects across the country was funded, all of them targeted at enhancing facilities in disadvantaged communities. The details of the 2019 programme are currently being considered and will be announced in due course.
Thank you, Minister. As I was saying, in the area which RAPID deals with, often we don't see, or used to deal with, often we don't see the impact of it as clearly as you see in a rural village or a rural area. And certainly I stay in the inner city, in North Inner City in Dublin, and you know, I notice there is huge problems there. Huge problems of deprivation and decline, and you know, whole streetscapes that need huge amount of enhancement and work to be done. There's, you know, and really, you know, the communities in those areas are people who want a chance, and I think any effort can be made to invest in those areas as well as the rural areas is absolutely necessary. The amount of funding, as I say, seems very small compared to last year, and while I acknowledge you say it was a once-off £8 million, we hope it's a once-off every year, because, and maybe a little bit more than that, because it is a scheme that has made a huge difference. You know, and I would, you know, I'm always here to recognise and acknowledge when something is done well. And that particular scheme has made an awful difference to an awful lot of small communities around the country, and the level of funding that's available needs to be brought up to at least the level it was last year, and hopefully a little bit more than that if that was possible.
Thank you very much. Deputy, just, you know, you mentioned again about the Dublin issue in relation to poverty, and that's why, like I say, in 2017 we allocated £2.5 million for inner city Dublin, 2018 £3.5 million, and for 2019 £6.5 million, and also the funding that we to South Dublin County Council, which we allocated as well. And in your own constituency, you're right, in Sligo-Leitrim area there was over 433,000. Now, in when I amalgamated the two programmes, the Community Enhancement and the RAPID scheme, there was £2 million in each of them, so that was £4 million. And you're quite correct. From savings in my department last year, I made a political decision. I felt this scheme was a good scheme. I felt this scheme was targeting where it should target. And as I said to Deputy Curtin earlier, I have to monitor this scheme to make sure that this funding is going to the most needy and to the most disadvantaged. And I'm happy so far, but we will be doing, I will be monitoring it, and I will be looking at it, and I will make sure, because I intend to go through to see where the funding was allocated, what areas got the actual funding, because I think it's important that, you know, if this fund is there for a specific purpose, that it's spent on a specific purpose. That's why the LCDCs, I'm giving them the opportunity, and I hope that and I know that they have done a good job this year, but I will have to monitor that, and I will look at it. But for this year, we have £4 million in the programme. If later in the year I could get some savings, I look at that.
Final question from Deputy Ken.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, I was one morning, in fact it was last Tuesday morning, I was in Bundoran, and on the other end of my constituency, and the issue there was around the amount of buildings that are in the town that are closed up and nobody living in them and nothing happening. You know, and that's another aspect of this. While this funding is for public works, if you like, and for community works, there are many people out there who own buildings that are in fact a liability rather than an asset. And if some scheme or some element of a scheme could be brought in to provide funding to help people, to turn those liabilities into assets that people could actually live in these towns and villages around the country, it would make a huge difference. And I always spoke to you about this before, Minister, and it's something that I think, at this point, while we know there is huge problems in many areas of the country, one of the big problems we have is housing. And housing is something that we all have a responsibility, and every department has a responsibility to try and do something about in a proactive way. I know some local authorities, put the squeeze on people through threats of compulsory purchase orders and things like that. In most cases, they cost an awful lot of money and they don't really work. If some incentive could be put in place to get people, to generate these buildings into housing accommodation for people, that they become an asset that they can use, the government will get tax on it as well. So, it makes common sense.
Minister,
and I would applaud the Minister to do something around that issue.
Again, Deputy, you're right. This is a very good programme, and that's why, and I think really it was distributed very fairly. I gave 125,000 to every local authority. Then I looked at disadvantaged areas, and I gave 60% for that, and a 40% in of population. So it was fairly distributed throughout the country, and it's a scheme that the funding can be used for whether it's CCTV equipment, energy efficiency projects, as you said, it can be community centre, community amenities. It's a scheme that's open, and it's a scheme that can be used. And again, at local level, the LCDCs, they will look at it, they will make the decisions, and they're the ones on the ground that should know where the most need is. And that's why I'm hopeful that this scheme will work, and that we give it to the people that need it most.
We move on.